Redefine Strength.
And I'm Leanne.
And thank you for joining us for another chat about all things powerlifting, coaching.
Redefining strength one conversation at a time.
Okay, welcome back. It has admittedly been some time since we last recorded a podcast, and that is because we have been quite busy moving into a new location, a much bigger location for our gym, which has taken us, it's now been a year, and that's taken us a bit of time.
Yep.
But now we thought let's come back to our podcast, which we actually enjoyed filming and recording previously. But once again, we've also upgraded our new digs in our podcast space.
We have.
Yeah.
Got a nice little Harry Potter thing here.
Yes, you can tell. Who's a Harry Potter lover here?
Actually, yeah, everyone can look at every bit of influence in it. There can be a lot of Easter eggs. There you go.
There's a little bit of Easter eggs, a bit of Studio Ghibli right here. My Neighbor Totoro. Some Taylor Swift.
No, they can't see that.
What do you mean?
That?
Yeah, it's Taylor Swift.
Yeah, but you can't see it on there.
Yeah. Oh, okay, rightio.
Yeah.
And then above your head is a little Thor's hammer, a golden snitch, little tidbits here. We might change it up for every single podcast.
Like a Where's Wally?
Yeah, have like a little random different objects. Yeah.
I'm sure that's why people are going to tune in to listen to us.
Anyway, so this is, I guess, our first podcast back after some time. And what we want to talk about today, the main topic is, I guess, looking at differences in lifters. So from a coaching perspective, you know, as a coach, you get a variety of different, I guess, lifters coming in, all the way from beginners to intermediates and all the way through to advanced lifters. So my question for you is, I guess, what, firstly, are the key differences that you would say differentiates a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced lifter?
I think, firstly, it's not like there's not a, you're not all of a sudden one day you're a beginner, the next day you're an advanced. It is like a bit of a spectrum. So you can have people that are, real beginners to people that are still, you'd probably still class as beginners, but they've been training for a little while. And then that's sort of, they sort of gradually, you'd look at them more as intermediate lifters and then eventually sort of advanced, rather than thinking about it as like, really rigid, like this is a beginner, this is an intermediate, this is an advanced. It's just a spectrum going across. In terms of that, basically a beginner makes really strong progress to start with, and then you have diminishing returns. The longer you train, the more you need to do to get less and less returns on what you do. Training's a lovely thing. It's like the reverse of investing.
Yep.
Basically, it's the reverse of investing. Imagine investing in a share, and the more money you invest, the less return you get. Generally, it's the opposite. It's supposed to go exponentially higher.
And I guess that's probably the reason why, I guess, a lot of people, when they first start out, they go, great, all the progress. But as they continue staying in, whether it's a sport or just in strength training, and realizing or recognizing the need to do more work and not seeing the amount of progress that they were originally making, it can be a little bit.
And I suppose that's why you're looking at it in terms of like, health and fitness versus the sport of powerlifting and continually adding weight to the bar. So that's why, people can chop and change, and they might, do a little bit of powerlifting, do a little bit of running, go into, call it bodybuilding or whatever.
JJ?
Or BJ. Yeah, that's right. Everyone, powerlifters go from, it's powerlifting to BJJ. I went the opposite way. I went BJJ when I was younger into powerlifting. There you go. I've gone the reverse. I never get the trend right, do I? I always do it.
The wrong way around.
I always do it the wrong way around. It's terrible. If I reverse my life, maybe,
Benjamin Button.
Yeah, that's it. I'm the powerlifting's Benjamin Button. I'm going to change my Instagram. Oh, that's funny. But anyway, so yeah, in terms of a straight novice, if someone walks through the door, I think it's not just sort of categorizing them as a novice either, because they might come in and they say, look, I've got no experience training structured strength training. However, they might be, let's say, 40 years old, no experience in structured strength training, but they've played competitive sport at a really high level for 15 years, like from the age of, I don't know, 15 to 30.
It could be what? Like a team sport,
Yeah,
ball sport,
any sport. They just haven't had a
individual
structured.
sport.
They haven't had a structured strength training program. I mean, most team sports and individual sports now
Well,
would
I
at a
would
high
also
level.
argue at a high level. So if you were, I guess, competing in a high level, at a high level in a sport, you would most likely be doing some form of strength training.
Well, now I think yes, but then you've got to remember as well, if someone's 40, they were training, 10 years ago. I mean, even from late 90s, early 2000s, most high level sporting programs have strength and conditioning programs in Australia. I mean, they were around for, ages.
I'd say America is more ahead of the game when it comes to understanding the importance of strength training for high level athletes.
Yeah.
In other sports.
Yeah, I think they got a lot of their information off the Soviets, and then and then sort
the
of
Chinese.
Well, Chinese. You're going to get me off on a tangent.
Sorry.
We'll go on for a political sort of, why American programming is different than.
Let's reserve that from another.
Some
podcast.
of the ideas.
I'm interested to hear about the differences in the political differences in programming across different countries.
Yeah,
we'll reserve it for another.
No,
podcast.
But why people program certain ways as well? What has led them to program certain ways? It's very interesting.
Okay, we'll park that for another podcast. Yeah. But continuing on in terms of your novice to your intermediate to your advanced lifters.
Yeah. So again, the novice coming in with a big sporting background and with no structured strength training is going to be a lot different than a 40-year-old walking through the door that's been absolutely sedentary their whole life. Than, let's say, someone that has had structured strength training but hasn't done it since the age of 35 and may have had some serious injuries as well. So it's looking at all of these different starting points, but I would still classify each of those as
beginner,
more beginner. And how would I say that someone's a beginner to start with? Well, they can make progress session to session, a week to week, basically.
So are you saying that the real key difference that determines whether someone's a novice or beginner lifter to an intermediate is the rate of progress?
You could look at it, rate of progress or sensitivity to the stimulus. So if someone they've got they can make a lot of progress off very little stimulus, I'd say that they're probably more
beginner.
Now there is caveats to that too, yes.
Can I ask then, because you said sensitivity to stimulus,
yep.
right? But we also know that when it comes to strength training or anything really, it's about specificity. So could you be a more intermediate or advanced lifter, but still be a beginner in, say, push-ups or pull-ups, just because you haven't done that movement? You are therefore sensitive to that movement based on the principles of specificity. Yes,
well, we've had people that can bench press a lot of weight that can't do 1 or 2 chin-ups as well. So there is strength. What are you strong at? Yeah. So I'm trying to find a really good example, but generally speaking, most athletes now would be strength training, and they would be doing some form of squatting or hinging movements in that strength training, especially if it's, most things are ground based except swimming, but motorsports, horse riding, equestrian. Yeah.
I was thinking skydiving.
Yeah, skydiving, competitive. Actually, there's a niche strength and conditioning program for competitive skydiving.
Have you not seen? It pops up on my Instagram.
Literally just hold that for a couple of minutes.
No, it's the aerial.
Oh, yeah.
Is it iFly or something like that?
I know.
And you go into this big tube.
Actually, looks quite cool.
And do the aerial diving, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's a lot of skill there.
Yeah, a lot of coordination
and core, to hold position and to be able to maneuver your body. Sorry, that is a huge digression, but it is interesting.
Well, again,
and same thing with say acrobatics.
Yeah. Well, you're bringing it back. Like a squat, I think, is a fairly simple movement to teach. A bench press, you can say, oh no, there's a lot of skill involved, and there is to a degree, but you don't. You look at Olympic lifts, you look at gymnasts, you look at what they're doing, in terms of individual
highly
sports.
Skillful.
Yeah, you're looking at different sports that require a lot more skill that are individual sports or team sports. Powerlifting, we don't have to deal with the weather. We don't have to deal with other competitors. We don't have to dodge stuff. We don't have stuff being thrown at us, or we're not getting tackled or pummeled, or, you're literally doing Yeah, it's like a little, instead of a quip lifting, we'll call it, I don't know.
It's dodging. You have to dodge.
It's dodgeball, dodge lifting, dodge lift. It's like dodgeball and powerlifting. You have
you have to time.
No,
your
you have
squats.
a team. You have a team of you have 5 platforms each side, 5 a side, and I don't know what you do, but that's just anyway. I'm sure we can come up with something. But yeah, yes. A novice lifter. We're looking at some of those scenarios. We're also you asked if someone could be strong but not have squatted. Now, I think the answer is yes. Well, you could have, let's say you've got someone who's been a labourer since they've been a tradie, they've started being a tradie, they're a brickies labourer, or they're just used to carting stuff around, and
they've just got raw
we'll call it
strength.
Call it farm strong, or they've been working.
We'll call it functional.
Functional. Okay, look at someone who's for 10 years they've been their main job's putting in fence posts on a farm. That is hard work. They haven't squatted, benched, or deadlifted, but let's say, they're just ridiculously strong, and that's what they've been doing all day. Like, that person is going to be different than, I don't know, the desk worker who's been sitting down for the last 20 years doing nothing. And
so you said it was also in relation to, I guess, a novice or a beginner who has, in terms of lifting and strength training, but has been playing different sports. You're also talking about other, I guess, activities as well that involves elements of strength, coordination. It doesn't have to be sport per se, but it could be, that linked into their profession.
I'd look at every single one of those examples, even the person who's coming in and tapping in fence posts for 10 years, who is really strong. If they were going to start a structured strength training program, I would still call them all beginners. They're beginners.
Yeah.
And because you're sort of teaching them a new movement. And then you're starting at a lower dosage, and you're looking at that sensitivity each week. And generally you're starting lower, and you're just seeing how long they can progress off a fairly sort of basic template, really.
Yeah.
And, then based off that, are they stopping, like if they're making progress block to block like that, and even, starting off, it might be just week to week. If they're making progress in this week to week sort of structure, just keep doing that.
So would you then say that the way that you program for a beginner lifter is actually quite different to the way that you would program for a more intermediate to advanced lifter?
Yeah, 100%.
And what are those differences? Like, how do you determine when someone moves, I guess, from that spectrum, moves along that spectrum from a beginner to an intermediate, and therefore how would you adapt or change their program as they move through the levels of lifting?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different methods and ways of trying to achieve things, but I think there's something that holds true with, and I've spoken about it many times on a podcast, is we can look at things as different. We'll call them different dosages. I think some books refer to them as loads, but you have loads that are
volume load.
No.
Dosage.
No, just load. Let's call it a stimulating. We'll call it dosage. A stimulating dosage. So a dosage that is stimulating, which helps drive progress. You have a maintenance dosage, which if you do that dosage, you stay at the same level, and then you can have a detraining dosage. So if you do that dosage, you actually regress a little bit. Now, generally, you don't want to do a detraining dosage. You can for a little bit, but like generally in your career of lifting, or within your training, your goal is to get stronger, so you should be trying to make sure everything you're doing is stimulating. But sometimes as you become more intermediate and more advanced, there should be some maintenance loads as well for certain lifts. So you might be pushing, let's say, a squat with a stimulating load, and maybe your deadlift's just got a maintenance load, or reverse it. You might be pushing deadlifts a little bit more, and you might be having squats with a bit more of a maintenance load. So you're pushing for a block or two. You're trying to increase your deadlift, the weight on the bar, or you're trying to increase stimulus for your deadlift, but you can't grow both the squat and the deadlift together. So you have to drop one back a little bit. So you're trying to maintain that. Now people go, I don't want to do that. I want to keep everything progressing. Everyone wants the cake and eat.
Why can't you keep pushing both?
Well, okay, you might look at it like things that we've run before. We drop back the deadlift dosage, and the deadlifts keep growing because, in some cases the squats help grow the deadlift because it's just knee extension, hip extension. So if we're adding squat volume or call it dosage, if we're adding squat dosage and limiting deadlift dosage, your deadlift's still going up. That might be a little bit masked during the training block, but when you deload, your deadlift goes up. So again, if you notice that, then that's something you pay attention to. You might run the same thing and deadlift's not moving anyway. In fact, deadlifts are regressing. And you're like, geez, like I'm doing all this squat stimulating load. I thought the squat would help drive the deadlift more than the other way around, but the deadlift's not moving. And this is assuming, externals, all of that. Everyone's, got everything else in check because that's, the thing everyone sort of talks about first. But just
externals, so things like, your sleep, your nutrition, your health, overall health, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm
stress,
treating it like a lab test. So it's like, okay, we're in a controlled environment. All of that's controlled.
Clinical.
Yeah, all of that's controlled. It never is. But it's like if you're trying to look at it like that, you need to, have certain sort of caveats in your head. But generally, if the squat's going well and something's happening with the deadlifts, it's probably not externals, because if your externals are really bad, then the squat's probably not going to go that well. So you can make an educated guess to say that, maybe there's something else we need to do with the deadlift. Maybe we do need a little bit of more deadlift volume.
Would you say that at that point where you are making those decisions as a coach, that's when you're referring to a lifter who is more intermediate level? You wouldn't necessarily have a beginner level lifter who is having,
I'll probably
needing those considerations.
Beginner lifter, no, they wouldn't need those considerations. Everything can be a stimulating dose because you're doing such lower dosage and the weight is generally lower on the bar. That's another.
Unless they're brutally strong because they're a farmer or and they can start at a higher weight.
Yeah. But then that's, again, you still probably run a basic cycle to start with just to sort of test it and see, but you probably find that they're not going to stay on it for as long. Like if someone comes in brute force, never deadlifted and pull 300 straight away, I'd probably err on the side of caution. Like even in that basic template, I'd probably lower the dosage even more because they've never trained before and already have the ability to deadlift 300, squat like 270, 280. That's like, okay, well, we'll drop everything back a little bit and then we'll just sort of see how this goes. And, still start with the same template, but you're probably not going to be sticking with that for as long. However, you're talking about a unicorn. I've never met someone that hasn't
strength trained and pulled 300.
No, I met 1 year ago. There's an Islander that I trained with years ago that never really strength trained, was 160 kilos and ridiculously strong, could squat a house. But anyway, never done any strength training. But yeah, aside from, you're not going to get someone walking through the door that's done no strength training that can all of a sudden pull 300. That's a unicorn. But yeah, in that scenario where the unicorn walks through the door, then yes, that's what I'd do. But that's what everyone loves to focus on. It's like, what supplement do I take? What do I do in this case when X, Y, Z? It's just like,
could I be the unicorn?
It's like none of us are that special. None of us are that special. I'm sorry. I would, you'd love to coach some unicorns, but they're just, that's why they're unicorns. They're not around.
They're few and far between.
Yeah.
Well, what about an abominable snowman then?
Yeah.
Or a Loch Ness monster.
Loch Ness monster. Ooh, have to do a bit of neck work.
Imagine a unicorn, a Loch Ness monster, an abominable snowman, and a phoenix.
Yep. How would you program for them? Yep. It'd be interesting.
So really, there are programming.
So how would I
differences?
How would I transition? So the example I gave there with stimulating loads is probably more towards a late stage, intermediate, into more an advanced level lifter. What would I do first once let's say you can probably keep someone going for about a year as a novice, realistically. Like, I keep saying, I've said this multiple times, but any idiot can train an idiot for a year. Like, that's why, there are so many different methods and so many different programs with so many different languages, because everyone needs to come up with a new language because their program's the best and can guarantee you results, which they can for the first probably year if people are consistent.
Now, this is my question, though, in terms of beginner versus intermediate lifter, and the key difference being rate of progress, right? Now, what if you've got, and I'm talking about a real life scenario that you have.
Yep.
You have gotten a lifter who has been lifting, competing for 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
So arguably they're past that beginner phase and they're now in that intermediate phase.
Yep.
And they've walked through the door
Yep.
and they've gone, okay, like, can you train me? And within that first year of training with you, but it's their 4th year
Yep.
of lifting, let's just say, pretend. They've all of a sudden experienced what you would argue the rate of progress that a novice or beginner lifter would. So would you recategorize that person as a beginner lifter when technically they're more intermediate just because of the number of years that they've been in the sport and lifting weights, etc.?
Not really, because you didn't start with a basic sort of template that a beginner would get. So it was pretty much looking at, looking at the progress that they made, the dosage that they had, and literally just making an educated guess and going, well, it seems like you need a little bit more sort of dosage and being a bit more specific with your main lifts. And that's literally all we did. We did more work on the main lifts.
So in that scenario, this person came in, they were technically an intermediate lifter, but you treated this lifter as a beginner terms of the template approach or terms of how you actually put a program together. You didn't actually go, okay, they're more intermediates. When you become a bit more nuanced with different things, you just went, let's just simplify it and let's focus on the 3 main lifts. And then from there, they showed huge amount of progress.
Well, there's different templates for different levels. So if I have an intermediate walk-in, I'd have an intermediate style template that I would start with. If I had a beginner walk-in, I'd have a beginner style template. If I had a more advanced lifter, I'd probably still have a more advanced style template, because it has to be templated when you start with someone. Even if they give you all of their previous training data, you can look at it and make certain assumptions, but until you see someone train and how they actually respond, like, you can use it as a little bit. It just means that they mightn't stay with that template for as long. So yeah, it's all still a templated approach to start with, because you can't start with anything less, because it's like any what's it called again? I heard it the other day or a couple of weeks ago. Gall's law. No complex system can ever start being. Basically, you can't create a complex system, or all complex systems start from simple systems. They need to be simple first, and it's like a tree growing, and then they start to become complex. You cannot just go straight to complex. But this
person has already been competing and lifting for 2-3 years, so technically they've already gone from a simple system to a more complex one. Wouldn't you then just continue that complex system?
You just said then, but I haven't seen that.
So that's what I'm saying. So like, regardless of what their history is or what their training history is, still treat that person with a simple system and then the complexity as they grow. Especially
if they're changing methods. That's literally it. That's why there's different coaching methods. If I looked at a program and it was similar method to what I might use, then I would be more inclined to, it makes more sense in terms of what we're doing. So it's a hard one when you're going from maybe one coaching method to another. Now, you still got sets. There's still principles that you follow. So you can still look at how much work someone is doing. Let's say they're not squatting much, or they're not doing much of the main lifts, at 20% main lifts and 80% accessory work. You can still make inferences into how much work they're putting through their legs.
Through the accessory movements.
Yeah, so they could have, they might not be tracking volume load, they might be tracking number of hard sets. They're squatting, 4 hard sets a week or 3 hard sets a week, but then they're doing another, 10 to 12 sets of leg pressing movements and then another couple of leg extensions. So it's like, all right, well, you then don't wipe off all the accessory work they're doing and go, oh, well, they're only squatting 4 sets a week, so we're going to start with 4 sets a week. You're probably going to find them regress really quickly.
Because the overall load or overall dosage is less.
It's a detraining load you're giving them now. Yeah. So you might go, oh, well, I'm going to increase the number of squatting sets from 3 to 4. It's like, and I'll just ignore all the others and be super specific. It's like, no, but they've just done another 15 sets of leg accessories. So it's about trying to sort of find a bit of a balance between the two. So that's, I like, if I start a general template, like most people start, they'll be squatting 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And then we'll sort of look at how people respond to that.
Yeah.
And then, so in terms of how they make progress, and how they were able to go through those newbie gain phases. Well, in my mind, it's very simple. It's just that we increased dosage progressively from what they were doing, and that was it.
So basically, and this is me simplifying it massively, when of course, the actual nuances of programming and coaching isn't as simple as, I'm making it out to be.
Well,
but simplistically though.
No, that's where I disagree as well. Like, as in, yes, like, everyone loves to think that it's super complex, and everyone loves to think about things that become complex. But like I just said, in terms of Gall's Gall's law, it was called. You've got to start simplified, and then it becomes complex. So the fact that, and I hear this a lot, everyone's like, oh, everyone assumes that their coach or their programming so complex. And it's like, if you as an athlete don't understand what your coach is doing, then it's like you're being gaslit, because it should be simple. You should understand what you're doing. You should know the approach. It's like, okay, we're trying to achieve this. We're doing this. We're trying to achieve this. It's not like, some people just like to think that it's magical or wizardry or whatever. But it's maybe people like that.
That's your common phrase at the gym.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm not a wizard. That's what you keep saying. And I go, yes, Harry.
Well, the weight is the weight.
You're a wizard.
Regardless of how you look at it, you've got the exercise you're doing. You're trying to get strong at squats. You're practicing squats. Whether, you might try and, you do this variation for this reason or that reason or that reason or whatever. But at the end of the day, you're doing some squats. You're doing some sets and reps of squats. You're doing a certain amount of volume of squats. You're doing it at a certain intensity. That's what you're doing.
But you just said also that as, I guess, the lifter grows, as they transition through that spectrum from beginner to intermediate to advanced, obviously the system that you're using for that lifter has to grow from grow from simple to a more complex system.
Exactly.
And I think it's more that question of getting more complex, and what does complex look like?
So I'll give you an elevator speech which will simplify the complexity, I hope. This is taking someone from a novice to an intermediate to an advanced. When someone's a novice lifter, this will be a bit longer than an elevator speech, I just realized.
Okay, go on.
When someone's a novice lifter, and we're just going to focus on powerlifting, they need to focus on squatting, benching, and deadlifting, the competition movements. And they've got a very low dosage of the competition movements, and they're making progress with that. As you progress through their career, you're giving them more. This is my view of those competition movements. You're getting better at those competition movements, and you're doing more dosage with those competition movements. Eventually, you get to a point where you can't do more of those movements. It becomes impractical because you run out of hours in a day.
Yeah.
If you want to take it to its logical sort of endpoint, you cannot do more work. Eventually, you can only do as much work as you can recover from. So you cannot recover from that. You cannot physically do more work across a block or across a week or whatever. There are many ways of trying to figure out how to do more work, frequency, whatever, but who cares? Let's just say we cannot give you more work. That's it, rather than focusing on the minutiae of how to do things and, get optimal stimulus to fatigue ratios, all of that. You can't do more work. So then I would look at it and go, how I can't do more of squatting, benching, deadlifting, and it's not all going to stop at the same point. Then I'd look at adding in maybe some variations of the movement, and I'd lean more into those variations because I can't give you more of something, and that's a very easy lever to pull. So then I have to make whatever it is we're doing more challenging.
Yeah.
So then I would, add in more variations. Now, again, I'm not going to say I'm only going to give you squats until you get to that point. Like, there will be points along where we play around with a few variations, but we're probably going to be more specific to the movements we're doing. But when we reach that point where we can no longer do any more, it becomes impractical to do more. We figure out how to make what we're doing harder. How do we get that stimulating load? Because I can't just keep adding more volume load or more training dosage. And, the average intensities, we're already capped. We need to figure out how we make what we're doing harder. Now, we can look at that in terms of lift specific. So for a squat, we can look at different variations that we might lean more into than we did previously. And we can also look at then leverages off someone and go, well, hey, maybe we can get a bit more work into their quads by doing this. And that's where you can start to look at, it becomes a little bit maybe a little bit harder. So you got to be a bit, you can't just all of a sudden go, all right, we're going to throw in like 15 sets of leg press because you need to work your quads at that advanced level. And all of a sudden it's like, boom, your performance drops, your squat goes to crap, which then affects your deadlift because it's like a Queen Mary trying to turn and recorrect the course. Whereas if you make that mistake with a novice, not that you're going to give a novice 15 sets of leg press, but let's just say, hey, we're going to change something with this program. It's like, oh, yep, that didn't work. And by next week, they're recovered again and they're fine. You've got to look at the data that you've got along the way, and then you use that data over the years of coaching someone to make those informed decisions. So that's why an advanced program can look very, very different for every individual, which is why if you've hit a plateau or you've let's say, an intermediate lifter, you haven't made progress, you immediately look to someone else and you look at, oh, but they're making progress. They're only ever going to put up their best lifts on Instagram anyway.
Yeah.
But you look to what they're doing and then you assume you know what they're doing, even though you haven't seen their program. It's like, oh, but they've got singles in. Look, they post up these all the time. Or it's like, well, of course they do. No one's going to post up their back off sets. That's just boring. Even though I find that the most interesting. But anyway.
You find it the most interesting,
well,
but I guess not a lot of people find that interesting.
As in odd, I mean, I like doing straight sets for a lot of people because, I find that, especially like intermediate levels. And again, not everyone has to have straight sets, but one of the benefits is that if I give you 4 or 5 sets with the same weight and it's it's challenging enough, let's say the RPE climbs across the sets, it's really good for technique and feedback because each set is the same weight. And you're hitting your set of 3, 4, 5 each set, and you're getting that feedback. And it's sometimes what can happen is you hit your top set and you go, oh, that was a little bit off, or I felt a little bit out here, or my hip shot up a bit early, or, I just misgrooved that. I'll fix it on my back downs. And you back down like 15, 20%. And then you're hitting volume for back downs. And, I've fixed my technique. I've done that. It's like, no, you've just taken, 15, 20% off the bar. That's why it feels better.
Yeah.
But there's also benefit to that as well because, you get that heavy exposure and then you're making sure that you're working. So it's still good to be working on the skill or the technique. But if you keep running that same block over and over and your lifts aren't going up, it's like, okay, maybe I'm not doing enough work. Like you've got to zoom out a little bit and go, well, and again, you can do the same thing. Like sometimes we get so fixated on the training week or the training session, like, oh, I'm going backwards because I had that really bad training session or really bad training week. What have the last 2 or 3 blocks look like? How is the trend going?
Yeah.
And then you can ask yourself a bunch of questions as well.
And that's something that you also talk about. You talk about the trend, the training trend, and in relation to, I guess overall progress, because we can as lifters get so fixated on the minutia that it becomes that you're blinded by the bigger picture.
Well, even let's say you still got that intermediate lifter. I was saying, because I'm saying like, you're doing more over time, and it literally is. But there's going to be periods where you do a little bit less. So you might be doing more over time, but then there might be a block or two in that late stage intermediate. You've been training, 3, 4, maybe 5 years. You actually drop back your volume strategically for a period of time, and I would say that in that period as well, you might try a couple of variations or try a few other things as you lower the dosage. There's 2 things that can happen. Well, 3 things. You can drop the dosage. That could be a good little reprieve.
Desensitization.
Yeah, desensitizing dose.
Yeah.
Desensitizes a little bit. Your body gets a bit of a reprieve, and then all of a sudden you can resensitize to the volumes you were hitting previously, or build back up to the volumes you were hitting previously and continue making progress. The other thing that you might do during that time is you might look at, certain weaknesses around the lift as well. You might implement a few strategies to fix some of the weaknesses with the lower dosage, because that's smart. If you want to put in a change to something with technique, like a bigger change, and try not a big change to technique, because generally your technique's going to be fine at that level. But let's say there's something an approach you want to use to target a specific weakness. It makes sense to drop the dosage from everything else you're doing, because if you're trying to target something and you're still hitting the higher dosage and you're throwing something in, you can't just add it on top at that level. You have to integrate it in. There's got to be a bit of give and take. You've got to drop a little bit, add something in, see if it works. Sometimes you don't even know if it works. Like visually it might look okay, but the performance trend is still sort of staying the same or going down because you don't have that stimulating load in there as well. And then it won't actually become apparent until, you start then
on down the track when you're back to, I guess, your normal programming.
Well, you've integrated it in, it's worked in that, and then you build into, you might take that out, or you might sort of keep it in there, but at a really sort of low dose as we start to build everything back in to see if that makes a change. Then the question you have to ask yourself is the reason why we're getting strong now, was it because we just desensitized to a bit of training and now we're resensitized? Or was it that we made, it's not a technique change, it's like addressing a weakness or something like that. So, let's say we put in something like for quad weakness, and we tried a few different movements or different ways of approaching something to build the quads. or was it both? Like, and the real answer is, well, you don't know, but that's why you're not trying to change too many variables there. So, but you're basically, and this is where at that advanced level you're sort of talking to the athlete there. So.
This is where it has been a process of little bit by little bit. Different changes that you've made along the way, not all at once, in order to minimize noise and also for you to get a better understanding of what's actually working by minimizing the number of variables that you're changing. You have a better gauge of what actually is working, what's not working, to then adapt to the program.
So the elevator speech to that is stay fairly specific and increase dosage and when I say fairly, I don't know. I think people know what I mean, but you can add in little variations, but stay fairly specific, increasing dosage until you get to the point where it's impractical to, the curve's flattened. And it's not, until the curve's flattened, then add in variations to make what you're doing harder and more challenging, because that follows the long-term trend of diminishing returns over a long-term career of someone lifting. And we can caveat that with, let's say we have a lifter that's starting at 20 and then now an M1 lifter, 45. How is their training different there? So let's say
they've been training for like
25 years. They've got a huge capacity, but you're probably not trying to then raise that ridiculously or even more. It's about challenging them with what they've got there. In some cases, it might be looking at, this is just one strategy, looking at the average intensities of what they're lifting and trying not to make each session as hard. So if they can, using frequency to train more frequently so that each session isn't as taxing, so they can still get through the same amount of work, probably with maybe even slightly less average intensity, but they're still getting through the same amount of work there, and you probably find that's how they're going to continue hitting PBs in their 40s, and not like not just going in for the hero sessions. Not saying that's what you do in your 20s or 30s either, but it's like you can get away with having really pushing yourself a little bit more, and that can sometimes be a good stimulus. Whereas if you've been training 25 years, if you do something stupid and come in and just like, I'm going to go in and YOLO, or I'm just going to, would I be doing SBD AMRAPs with someone like that just to see how they are? Probably not. Probably not. Yeah. I would have a structure in place. And if I was, there'd be a damn good reason for it. Like it'd be, no, this has worked, and it showed that it's worked over however many years. This is what we're doing because it worked.
You know what? Part of me cannot wait until I'm in my 40s.
Oh, that's just one approach, but yeah.
Far. But it's not long.
There you go. But I think the differences that we haven't really focused on in terms of novice, intermediate and advanced lifters is how you actually, like that's just the programming style, how you actually go about coaching someone at those different levels. And I find that if someone starts as a complete novice, most of the coaching is going to be around making changes to their technique, what everyone thinks coaching is, a little technique adjustment. But it's probably you're making the biggest changes to their technique because you're trying to put them in the best position for their leverages.
So I would say like a very, very simplistic view, and I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, probably, I guess the perception across the board, generally speaking, is that the difference in terms of coaching differences between a beginner to an intermediate to a more advanced lifter is a level of autonomy. And level of, because of the level of experience. So for a beginner lifter, you'd be really more focusing on the skill, on improving the skill. And as they become more of an intermediate to an advanced lifter, you have less, the focus is less on that skill.
Yeah, you're essentially, so when there's autonomy, like you are becoming more autonomous and you're becoming more of a student of the sport as you progress with your lifting. And I think that that's a very important thing, because if you're relying on someone to literally stand next to you all the time and say, hey, do this, do that, like that's
sounds more like a PT relationship.
Correct. Yeah.
As in a personal trainer relationship with a client, as opposed to a coach athlete who is sort of entering the sport of powerlifting.
Yeah. So you would focus more on making the bigger technical adjustments, talking to them a little bit about their programming and helping them to make, let's say they come in there a bit beaten up or whatever, maybe help them adjust on the day as well if they need to. So,
I would still say that that's not just reserved for beginner lifters.
You haven't let me continue. That's why I said
on.
it's a spectrum. It's a spectrum. It's not like you're a beginner, therefore you should only do this.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not, as an advanced lifter, you can still give someone technical feedback, but you're probably not going to do it as often.
Where would your feedback, like, are you then saying that as you become more of an intermediate to advanced lifter, you require less feedback?
No, the feedback just changes. You require less technical feedback and less feedback about your, you know, about your technique. So it's not just, oh yeah, this looked like this or this looked like that. It's like as an intermediate lifter, I would say that as a coach, what you're looking at there is you're looking at the interactions, like let's say between sets. You're looking at how someone responds to a set. You're looking at what they're doing between. You're looking at how they walk into the gym. It's like, you know, are they looking, you know, are they looking
perky.
down? Are they looking perky? How are they moving? Like, what are they looking like as they're loading their plates? What are they looking like?
Why is that important though as a coach?
Because it's looking at things like body language, and I think that tells you a lot about a lifter as well. And then it may be, you know, if someone's looking a little bit down or whatever, you might go up and say, hey, you know, how you, you know, you ask them how the day is, all that sort of stuff. Like you do that more often, you're starting to get to know them a little bit more. Whereas when they're a novice and they're starting out, you don't know them that well. So they're not coming in to you because they want, oh, I like this person, I want to get to know them more. They're coming to you because I want to squat better.
Yeah.
But after 3 to 6 months, or, you know, that novice sort of, you know, even after the first sort of year or something, like they're pretty set in stone. Like the adjustments that you're going to make to their squat and bench are going to be smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So then what does coaching look like after that? And I think that, and it's not to say a beginner doesn't start to develop a relationship with the coach as well.
Until after a year, no.
Yep, after a year. Now we start. Now only after a year I'll start asking about how your day's going. Exactly. No, it's you'll focus more on that. So you start to learn more about them. They start to learn more about you, and there's more of that trust sort of built, I suppose. So you're maybe, let's, for a better word, say, you know, talking about their externals and things like that. And then that sort of becomes a little bit more important, especially when you're making decisions about the programming. So you're looking more at how the body's responding over a slightly longer period of time. So, you know, the really crazy week that they had at work during week 3 of a 6-week block has now maybe affected week 5, even though they hit everything in week 3. But then by the end of week 4, they're really starting to struggle because they had to do a couple of back-to-back sessions and struggle through week 3, or little things like that. And then
I think that's the hardest part of lifting in terms of, as an athlete, you get your program, you go, yep, I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you might be the most consistent person when it comes to hitting all of your sessions, doing everything. But the hardest thing that I find anyway is understanding. And when I say understanding, not just, oh yeah, I know, but truly understanding and experiencing the impact of externals, that externals can have on your training.
It's an evolving sort of conversation, and it's not like and I think this is where you've got to be careful sometimes as a coach. You got to not say, oh, well, you got that one bad night's sleep in week 2 that's now affected your week 5. It's nothing like that. It's looking at trends and having discussions around things. And if more discussions happen around certain trends, then you can start to draw logical conclusions. And it's not that you're just drawing them as a coach. You're starting to draw them together. And then the athlete starts to become aware of things as well. So then depending on, again, this is then focused on how far someone wants to push, or, you know, if they want to keep it as a hobby, or there's those discussions that start to happen as well. Like, you know.
That's all in relation to goals.
Correct.
Right? Intentions, purpose.
Correct. So if their goal is to be the strongest they can, then there's more work or more things that they're probably going to have to take into account. Like, they're not going to get away with, you know, 4 hours sleep and going out to raves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're going to have to, you know, if you're going to rave, maybe, 4 times a year, or you know, whatever.
Or be strategic when you have
strategic raves. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
No, in terms of where it sits in like your training block for like a year, or like in relation to like a competition that you have.
Or
have it earlier on.
Or like Nathaniel drinks once a year, so we made sure we had a deload on his birthday week where he had where he'd planned to drink, because that's his only time he drinks a year. So I was like, yep, well, that's what we're going to for. I'm going to make you run your hardest block on the following Monday.
That would be interesting to see.
But we don't know if he would have,
maybe
maybe get through it. I don't know. That's it. You got to, maybe you have to experiment with that.
Let's not encourage him.
He'd love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like at that intermediate level, you're starting to get to know the person more. They're starting to have more of a say as well in the program in terms of how they're feeling, and maybe a couple of things that they think, hey, I've tried this or I've seen this, what do you reckon? And it's starting to have that sort of two-way communication a little bit more, rather than just, hey, come in here, stand here, or try and do this. And, because you're coming in with a lot less information. You don't know how to do any of the movements, and you need to be shown.
So it's interesting that you talk about how as a lifter progresses and how you then coach them differently. Right. And one of the main things that you highlighted on is the observations of how a lifter is walking into the gym, how they're holding themselves, like the demeanor in relation to
how much rest are they having? Are they sitting on their phone for, have they gone through a bad breakup? Are they on their phone between
on Hinge every single night?
Yeah, there you go. Well, there's all this, and this is all stuff you start to talk about, but it's all important.
Yeah.
And I think it's all, like, we laugh, but I think it all matters in its own context. And I think that as someone, then, if they've been with you longer and they're now in that more advanced level, the relationship changes again, because I think that you're essentially teaching that person to become a coach. So then, instead of me looking at all of the variables, you now have two people brainstorming over those variables to then create a solution more together. And I think that very few people will get to that stage, but that's like in terms of the pinnacle of that elite level performance, like that's sort of what you want to have with your coach now, because it's not just a matter of, okay, I'll follow my program, I'll do this. As an athlete, you know your body inside out. So your insights into what's happening is so relevant and so important. And it's not just a matter of you come in and say, oh, hey, I'm feeling a bit this, we might need to change things up. It's like, you probably already know the protocols to add in anyway if you are feeling like that. It's more the projections and brainstorming around, okay, here are the plans. I think this worked really well last block. This is working really, really well. Or I've found that we've put this in and it's working, it's giving that sort of feedback. And knowing that, over a long term, hey, we've changed this little thing and it didn't seem to work. And, we did this for our squat and our bench press regressed quite a bit. It's just validating sort of what you're thinking as well. That becomes very important, especially when you think about that elite level. It's very difficult to keep increasing the dose with high specificity. You've got to make what you're doing harder. So you've got the dosage. You can probably still chip away a little bit each year, but you're trying to have what you're doing harder, and you're making it more challenging, because you've got goals to make progress. The progress you make at that elite level is going to be minuscule compared to what you made at the start. But the way you make the progress is by making what you're doing harder, not necessarily more, but you've got to create a more stimulating sort of dose. There are many ways of doing that, but in terms of principles, that's what you have to do. And I think that's where I dislike the less is more. People, less is more, and you've got to do less to do more. Like, I understand where things are coming from, but if you're talking about a long-term view of an athletic career, you're doing more over time, and that's inescapable. Yeah. So you've got the little stock ticker, and it dips down sometimes strategically, sometimes not. It will dip down, but that's I've trained for X number of years and then I just did this bit for a little bit less and I got all these really good results. It's like, forget the base of work that you've just done over here, and then you've spent 3-4 blocks building up this huge capacity, and then you did a little bit less on the following block or two, and your strength went through the roof. It's like, yeah, well, maybe it was the capacity you built.
Yeah, it's actually neglecting the bigger picture in that regard, and also the impact or the aftermath.
Yeah, it's like, oh, but I feel really good doing this. It's like, of course you do, because it's less load. And in some cases, that's an important thing to do. It's important to have those periods where you have less. So then you sort of go, well.
But it's also the importance of understanding how your body works in terms of adapting to stimulus, right? And same thing with in terms of increasing dose or how the way you program, same things in terms of the impact of externals on you. Things don't happen straight away. You don't have a cause and effect bang done, right? It can take time. So for example, you've had it's like 6 to 8 months of decent work, and then you do a little bit of whatever you call it, desensitization or decrease in dosage, and you go, oh, I've just done less, but I'm now hitting more. You've just conveniently forgotten the 6 to 8 months of work that you've done, and the fact that the impact or the residual impact or the ongoing impact of that 6 to 8 months is still happening and you're still experiencing it.
And in the short term, this is where some novices, this is where at a novice level, it's like, oh, but I feel really, this is the conversations that you might have. Like they might do, let's say 1 or 2 weeks of really hard training. They miss their first session on the next, or they miss 2 sessions the next week. And then they come in on the 3rd session. They go, oh, I feel amazing. How good's that? Like I only need to train once a week type thing. Like it's like, no, you've just given yourself a little deload. You're feeling fresh now. But then what they do is they then come in on so let's say I'll use a different example. They've trained for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Then on the 3rd week, let's say they train Monday, Wednesday, Friday. 3rd week they come in, they miss the Monday, they're busy, can't do it. Come in on Wednesday, oh, I feel amazing, everything moves like magic. How good's that? And then they come in Friday, oh, I feel shit. And then all of a sudden, it's like everything's heavy again. They're like, oh, why? Why is that? It's just like, you've given yourself a little peak on Wednesday, and it's like, and then you're like back to the grind, and it's like, your body's. You maybe lifted a little bit heavier on the Wednesday because you've just gone, oh, I can lift more, and then all of a sudden
you're experiencing your DOMs again.
Yeah, why is Friday hard? But that's a live example from a novice. But the same examples can be used for an intermediate or an advanced. It's just that the timeline's longer. 8 months to a couple of blocks or a block to 2 weeks, 1 week. It's exactly the same answer. Yeah, it's just longer. Yeah, and a bit more complex.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something that would love to delve further into in terms of we've gone into a bit of detail about the differences between that
You're
novice.
You're going to plug that in, the battery's gone.
Yes, novice, intermediate and beginner. I don't have my charger here.
So it's just going to stop. Okay.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying we've gone into a bit of detail, and I think we'd love to go a bit further in terms of I think focusing more on the intermediate level lifters, because I feel like in terms of coaching beginners, you can give them anything and they will progress. Yeah. But it's more that intermediate level, and how do you move that intermediate level lifter to a more advanced level? Do we have a lot of advanced level lifters in Australia?
Well, I'd argue and say no, because the research says that most powerlifters stay in for 2 years, 3 comps, and within 5 years, 95 or 96% of lifters have stopped.
Yeah.
So, no.
And so that, I think that's the challenge, right? So I guess the question is, if a majority of people are in that intermediate level, and, you were saying how if you look at the data that's out there in terms of the lifespan of a powerlifter, not a lot of people, majority of people don't stay in the sport for long enough to become an advanced level lifter. Yeah. Why is that?
Well, I think that goes back to what we said at the very start. And it makes sense, because the longer you train, the more work you have to do to make even less progress. And I think that is the reason, because people can make progress for a year or make progress for 2. It's just human nature. Like you want to, go into something, try something else or whatever. Most people aren't saying, oh, I'm going to be a powerlifter for the next 20 years or 10 years. Like they want to start it. They get a little bit of, but it's not like it still can't become part of someone's life as well. It's a very healthy thing to do. So it's like someone could still be in the powerlifting, let's say, sphere for 20, 30 years. They just don't compete all the time. They still train, but sometimes there's just different goals. They might go off and do something else, and they're still strength training, and then they come back to it. They're still sort of keeping that detraining or maintenance sort of dosage, doing something else for a little bit, and then maybe come back to it in, a little bit as well. The hard thing, and why I don't think many people come back to it though, is because you've always got your old numbers and you know what you've hit. And if you can't improve them, then that's the measure of improvement. because
So, yeah.
powerlifting is the sport of, now you could try a different weight class or something like that, but at the end of the day, if your total's not going up or if your GL's going down, it's like, well, you're putting in this work for things to stay the same or go down.
There's also such thing as, I guess, the longer that you've trained and you've had that history of training, and even if you take a bit of time off, which could be quite a significant period of like desensitization, right? Coming back, it's not like you're coming back as a newbie again.
Yeah.
You're coming back as an intermediate lifter again, even if you had, say, for example, you had like 5 or even 10 years off and you come back again, you're not going to be able to do the same program that you did when you first started.
No, but there's a thing called training residuals as well. So most people talk about it in layman's terms as muscle memory. You will be able to get, when I say get back, you will start making progress relatively quickly off relatively smaller dosages than you would have otherwise if you had done nothing. So your body does remember, and you will have a certain training residual, which will decrease in time as you age as well. But if you have trained for 10 years from 20 to 30 and then did nothing for 20 years until you're 50, you're still going to be far better off than if you did nothing and then you started training at 50. So you training at 50 with no base versus you training at 50 and you spent 10 years being a powerlifter, 10 years being a powerlifter, 20 years no training, you're still going to have quite a much higher training residual than you would if you had done nothing. So even if you start off very low dosage, you would make much quicker progress and be able to build more muscle having had that 10-year exposure earlier on. Yeah.
So as in those 10 years that you were lifting in your prime age, in your 20s, as I guess
giving you an artificial boost, yes.
Yeah. Helped your body to then adapt or grow muscle quicker?
So let's look at it this way, because this is the caveat, as in, people have time off and then you get really weak. I'll use myself as an example.
Can I just say the biggest deterrence for me from taking time off is DOMS?
Well,
because every time I've taken even a week off and coming back into training is just the DOMS, the delayed onset muscle soreness, is insane. Yeah,
but that's it's just showing you how your body's responding. So for instance, you're training for five years or whatnot. Let's say 2 or 3 years, or let's say 18 months. Most people, again, if we're using the 2-year example, let's say they've trained for 2 years or 18 months or whatever, and they take a month off. After that, now they will lose strength really quickly in the first 2 to 4 weeks, and then after then it starts to slowly go down. So they'll come back after that month and be like, "Oh crap!" They feel terrible. But if they don't kill themselves, they'll actually regain their strength. They're not all of a sudden, they haven't just lost all of the gains they've made in the previous 18 months. They'll probably be, it'll take them it's not going to take them 18 months to get back to where they were. It'll take them a block.
Yeah.
And then, you run a block 5 weeks or so, and then we're back because of the training residuals that your body has built up.
Then wouldn't you say then that block...
I'm using a block as an example. It could be less, it could be a little bit more, but yeah.
Yeah, right. Whatever it is, that period of time that you've come back and you've put effort in and you've now got recovered or built yourself back to where you were before you stopped.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that mean, though, that because of that desensitization period, you've now given yourself the ability to do less and achieve more?
That's exactly right. So that's what I'm saying. In terms of spinning it like that, it's actually not a bad thing taking a break, because you can call it a desensitization. Sometimes your body just needs it. Do nothing for, go and do something else for a month or so. Come back. Take 3 months off. Go and do something else. Take 6 months off. You can still come back, and it's like desensitized. You can do less work and start making newbie gains to start with, and then get back to where you were, and then off you go again.
So then with that frame of thought, then why, like you said one of the, I guess, reasons why people are less likely to come back, or because, of that whole, they've got their previous numbers in their head, and they're not, they're struggling to achieve those numbers again. Wouldn't
because it was a poor example I gave. I gave an example of someone who's been training for 20 or 30 or 20 years, had a profession, like a good career, and they've hit the highest that they possibly can. And they've, you can't hit more volume than that. And they've achieved the highest that they can. And then they've taken time off. It's going to be very difficult to get back to where they were. So the likelihood of them doing it, what swimming event has Michael Phelps gone into in the last 10 years? I'm not saying that he wants to go back in swim. Maybe he has swum. I don't know. But as in, he's not going to swim faster than he swam back when he raced his last Olympics.
But that's the other argument. There's also age.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And so I guess that's the other compounding factor or variable in this whole argument as well, is that obviously if you're talking about 20-year-old years down the track, well, that also means that you're 20 years older. Yeah. So it also means that biologically, physiologically, in terms of like you being at a prime age, to be not just training, but also I guess experiencing like growing muscle and that kind of thing. Your ability to grow muscle has diminished as you get older.
But again, we're focusing on the 0.001% of elite level athletes. If I take a 60-year-old who has, or a 60-year-old or a 65-year-old who's been strength training for 5 to 8 years, they're growing. They have much better health markers than someone who's 35 years old who has done nothing their whole life. So that 60-year-old who's never trained ever in their life is now stronger than they've ever been in their whole life, ever. Yep. Lifted more weight, produced more force just because they started training at 60. So it's like, or started training at 58 or whatever, so that you can always caveat it with that. But the only reason age becomes an issue is when you're an elite level athlete and you've been training from the age of, 15 to 38, 39, and then you're 40, 41, 50. Like, you're not going to have the same performance you did back when you were in your 20s. It's the same for any athlete. But we're not talking necessarily, well, we're talking it in that lens, but then in terms of powerlifting's really not at that stage. But it's interesting to draw those comparisons. But I feel like, and this is where we got to be careful, like the language that we use to describe improvements, training, diminishing returns, there is always context to what you're saying. And that's where sort of things can get murky, and that's where you get the less is more crowd convincing everyone to do less work, and, minimal effective dosage is all you need. And to be fair, for the majority of people, minimum effective dosage is all they need, because they're going to be strong, they're going to improve their bone health, they're going to increase their muscle mass, they're going to live longer, they're going to have a better quality of life. Mm-hmm. So that's all they need. But it's a hard one as well, because most people, I find, if they're wanting to start strength training or training, I find that, there's always a little bit more that they're after. It's not like, I just want to, do a little bit and like just do a tiny bit.
I think sometimes
that's probably
I reckon most of the times, like, you start off with that, right? You start off with that, like that very, very broad goal. I just want to get stronger. But then as you get into it, I think that's the most common reason why people then shift or get introduced or step into the world of powerlifting is they then discover, there's actually, like, I guess, something that I can strive towards is a bit more concrete, that gives me an actual, like, timeline, that gives me something to actually focus on and work hard towards for a concrete period of time, as opposed to that general goal of, I just want to get stronger. Can sometimes be a little bit airy-fairy.
It's not that. It's, I just want to look better. Because remember, if we didn't look better, if the fitness community, if getting stronger or going to the gym did nothing to make us look better, we wouldn't really have a fitness community. There'd be people who want to train to get strong. But if it didn't make us look better, like, how many people, is the fitness community really going to be that big?
Yeah.
Come on, we're very vain. Like, I feel like you're exactly right. With powerlifting, it's taking away that, I've got to look a certain way. It's like, focus on performance. And this is why I keep saying, to be honest, if you just focus on performance, getting stronger and being consistent, you're going to look better anyway. And you're going to not only look better, but you're going to feel better in your own body. And it's not even going to become a thing. And you're going to surround yourself with like-minded individuals who are training to achieve that same thing. So therefore, every time you come to the gym, it's a positive experience. It's not like you're thinking about,
how's my butt look like today?
Exactly. You don't have to, how's my butt look like now compared to, 3 months ago? And if that's what you're training for as well, like, if that's what's motivating you, then that's good. If that's motivating you, then keep doing that. Like it's like, what's the thing? You do you. But I just find that if we're really honest, if training at a gym did nothing to make us look better, but we could get all the other benefits, we could get stronger, we could get better health markers, but we look the same, no one would be training.
It's also because like the effort involved. Or
very few would be training, but
when you're talking about like the health industry as well.
Yeah.
Right. If people will always opt for the easier option, the simpler option, the easy pathway.
This is another podcast.
Less.
Yeah.
Do less to get more.
Do less to get more. Yeah.
Always choose that pathway.
100%.
Whereas the whole idea.
Why would you want to work?
Why
would you want to work harder to achieve less?
Yeah.
That's what training is.
Yeah.
So I think that is, if we hit the nail on the head, why people don't stay in the sport for longer, it's because of diminishing returns. You got to do more to get less.
Yeah.
It's like, who the hell? That's a terrible trade-off. I don't want to do that. So then it's got to become more about more than numbers, and what else are we actually getting out of it? So there is that, we talk about community, we talk about, health, we talk about
That's also where you've got performance goals.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what keeps people in for longer. I think it was, you were saying as well about in terms of the length of time someone stays with a PT versus the length of time someone stays with like a coach or
average time for a PT is about 6 months. And again, I don't know average time for a powerlifting coach, but the average time that the powerlifters spend in powerlifting, 2 years and 3 comps. So already that's more.
Yes.
A lot more. So we're saying, 2 years, 3 comps, it's not enough to get to that advanced stage, but it's already showing you that if you go to a sport like powerlifting, you're going to be in a structured strength training program for longer across everyone on open powerlifting. Or was that, I think that was taken in Australia only, but all feds, all comps, all years.
Yeah.
For Australian lifters. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
then I'd like to know the percentage of people who stay longer than that.
Well, the interesting thing was those that started powerlifting, I don't know the number of how long they stayed, but those that started powerlifting age 36 or over were in it for longer than those that were younger.
Yeah.
So basically, I think that's, sense of community, getting stronger, getting healthier, and just,
But I also think it's the at that age as well, you look at where is that person at that point in their life.
Yeah. Well, we didn't even
priorities in terms of like the age, whereas when you're younger, priorities are a little bit different.
Well, you also might look at financial stability as well. Like, can people afford powerlifting coaching and training, doing powerlifting like when they're younger as well. So maybe if they're working full time, it's all of a sudden now that could be, more affordable option. I mean,
but that could also be the influencing factor as to why people also don't stay as long with a PT, because a PT is charged by every single time you see them. So if you say you're training 3 times a week, you're paying for 3 sessions a week. That can be up to what, 300 plus.
No, 100%.
Whereas coaching can be a lot cheaper than that.
But I suppose that's talking about that's
for training 3 times a week.
Yeah, that's talking about most people look at gym memberships, and I think when I say most people, I think the most people in Australia would look at gym memberships as like, okay, you got 15, 20, up to $30, and once I start getting over 30, it's like it's obviously it's got to be it's got to be different. Whereas, most of the bigger chains, for the majority of people, are sort of charging somewhere between, I know Revo charges a lot less now, they're like $10, but it's sort of like, big 24/7 gyms are just fighting on price. So it's a different model, but I think there's still a language, and, people are sort of, it's still something to be considered as why people who are 36 and above staying in it longer than people who are under. That I think is a reasonable, reasonable thing to look at as well. Yeah.
I'm looking at the time now, and
we got to go for another 2 hours.
No, we've had a great conversation, and there's been a lot of things that we've actually brought up, which I think that we could actually park for another,
like we always do. Yep.
For another podcast.
Yes, definitely.
One thing I think is talking about that simple to a more complex system.
Yep.
And delving a little bit further into that.
Yep.
The other thing that I think we also spoke about.
We
sporked
about. Spork, I like sporks.
Spoke or talked about.
Spork. It's like a knife and a fork. Spork. Oh no, spoon. Spoon and a fork. It's my favourite utensil, spork.
Now I've forgotten. We were talking about Wasn't it the
Or splayed, sorry.
splay?
A splade, that's a utensil. It's a knife and a fork, a splade.
Speaking or explaining? Splaining.
Splaining. Speaking of splaining.
No, there were a variety of different things that we spoke about, which I think that opens up options for other podcasts.
No, definitely.
Yeah, no, I think it feels good to be back.
Yeah, it does.
And hopefully we will delve further into other topics if you're interested in listening to anything else. If you're interested to just listen to us waffle and its background music, white noise.
I'm pretty sure people don't want to hear us waffle.
But yeah, no, that was really good. And
thank you.
I think that's time.
I think that's done. Thank you for listening to Redefine Strength.
Make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all upcoming episodes.
Until next time.